Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers first. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Swaha, Tatsavitravare Vargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Astoma Satyamya. Tamsoma Jyotirgamya Mrityurma Amritam Gamya Om Sehna Bhavatu Sehna Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's open our Uddhava Gita books. Chapter number 16. And it's on page number 483 in our books. So, enumeration of the elements of material creation. That is the title of this chapter. Let's look at the summary first. In this chapter, there is a description of the material elements, the natures of the male and female, and birth and death. Various philosophies categorize the material elements in different ways. Although such differences are caused by the illusory energy of the Lord, they all are based on logic and are therefore acceptable. The material elements exist in all situations and in all places, and the insurmountable illusory energy of the Lord causes them to be understood in various ways. The knowledge acquired by the perception of the senses can determine to some extent the material elements, but can never penetrate to the eternal soul. There is a supreme controller of nature, and he is also the supreme enjoyer, nor the controlled, minute, individual souls. The three modes of material nature cause the conditioned souls to appreciate different aspects of material nature. Those in the mode of goodness appreciate knowledge. Those in the mode of passion appreciate activity. And those in the mode of ignorance appreciate foolishness. Time is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the original cause of material propensities is the Mahat Tattva. In this chapter, 25 material elements are enumerated. The Supreme Lord, material nature, the Mahat Tattva, false ego, ether, air, fire, water, earth, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, speech, the hands, feet, genitals, anus, the mind, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. In the beginning, the Lord glances over the material energy, so that the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the cosmic manifestation is brought into existence under the control of the Lord. In this way, there is a distinction made between the Purusha and Prakriti. Although in one sense, they are non-different as cause and effect. The universe is brought about by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, which cause matter to be in a constant state of transformation. The rebellious living beings are then forced to accept material bodies in the cosmic manifestation as a result of their previous fruitive activities. Because his knowledge of his self is covered by the illusory energy of the Lord, the conditioned soul cannot understand his actual position. The subtle body, which is filled with the desires for sense gratification, carries a helpless conditioned soul from one body to another. The body undergoes 9 stages of transformation due to being under the control of the three modes of material nature. These are impregnation, gestation, within the womb, birth, childhood, youth, maturity, middle age, old age, and finally death. From the death of one's father and the birth of one's child, one can understand the temporary nature of his own body. The conscious self is distinct from the material body it identifies with. The conditioned soul is in the darkness of ignorance, being bewildered by the objects of the senses, and thus he achieves various destinations, one after another, within the cosmic manifestation. In this way, the conditioned soul wanders throughout the universe under the spell of material nature, sometimes residing in heaven due to the predominance of the mode of goodness, sometimes appearing in human body due to the predominance of the mode of passion, and sometimes being forced into lower species of life due to the predominance of the mode of ignorance. The eternal soul never directly contacts the objects of the senses, but only the senses of the body. Therefore, the pleasure derived from material sense gratification is very limited and temporary. Only those who take shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, dedicating themselves to his devotional service, attain peace, whereas all others, even great so-called scholars, are tormented by the insurmountable influence of material nature. Okay? So beautifully explained, which we already know. Okay? This Prakriti and Purusha. So now Uddhava, this chapter starts with Uddhava's questions. So the first three verses are recited by Uddhava. Kati tatvani vishvesh sankhyatan shribhi prabhu navekadashyah panch trine atathatvam ihi shushrama kechit shat vimashtim rahur apre panch vishantim sapte ekhe navam shat kechit chatvare ekadash pare केचित् सप्तदश प्राहु षोडशे एके त्रयोदश एतावतं हि संख्या नाम ऋषियोः यद् विवक्ष्या गायन्ति पृथक् आयुष्मन् इदं नो वक्तुम् अहरसि. So these are verses number 1 to 3. So let's look at the translation of this and the explanation by this great author. Uddhava said, "My dear Lord, O Master of the universe, how have the great sages categorized the elements of the material nature? I have heard you said that there are 28 elements: the supreme controller, the spirit soul, the Mahat Tattva, false ego. See, false ego is Ahankar. The 5 gross elements, the 10 knowledge acquiring and working senses, Jnana Indriya and Karma Indriya, the mind, the 5 sense objects, and the 3 modes of nature. However, there are others who say that there are 26 elements, while still others point out 25, 7, 9, 6, 4, or 11 elements. And even others who say that there are 17, 16, or 13. How is it that great sages categorize the material elements in different ways? Please describe to me so that I am correctly understand this." After hearing the Lord's explanation of Karam Kand, Shri Uddhav now asks about some details of the Gyan Kand sections of the Vedas, desiring to gain a proper understanding. There are innumerable sages who have established their own opinions, and while doing so, they have ascertained different numbers of material elements. This is not actually contradictory because various philosophers have utilized various methods of categorizing the same reality. In these 3 verses, it is stated that some particular sage has ascertained that there are 9 elements. the Supreme Lord, the living entities, the Mahat Tattva, false ego, and the five gross material elements. However, besides these, there are 10 senses, the mind, the five sense objects, and the three modes of material nature, making a total of 28 elements. The word Ayushman, possessing eternal form, is significant in this regard. The Supreme Lord is eternal and full of knowledge of past, present, and future. And so he is the original and perfect philosopher. Different philosophers have given various opinions while enumerating the number of material elements. In this verse, Uddhava states that it is the opinion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that there are 28 material elements. These are the Supreme Lord, his energy, the intelligence, the false ego, the five gross elements, the mind, the five knowledge acquiring senses, the five working senses, the five sense objects, and three modes of material nature. The godless Sankhya philosophers. So godless means in the Sankhya philosophy, there's no mention of God. Who are averse to the Supreme Lord, asserting the number of material elements to be 24. They do not accept the three modes of material nature and Supreme Controller. Atheistic speculation on reality does not recognize the existence of God. Consequently, it is a worthless attempt to explain the truth. The Lord himself empowers different living entities to speculate and speak on reality in different ways. See, this is the freedom given in the Vedic culture. The different philosophers, they came up with this different opinions, but in essence, it's the same thing, though, if you look at it. Okay, so whether it's a Sankhya philosophy or the Vedic philosophy, okay, takes us to the same place. So next verse now, Lord Krishna answers this question. Verse number 4. Yuktam cha santihi sarvatra bhashante brahmana yatha mayam madhyam udgriha vadatam kimnu durghatam. Lord Krishna said, because all the material elements pervade the entire creation, it is justifiable that various philosophers have categorized them in different ways. All these learned men have worked under the influence of my mystic potency, thus seeing things from various perspectives. So it all depends from which angle you're looking at it or which perspective you are using. Looking at the same thing though. Although there seems to be contradictions in the statements of the great sages, there's actually none. The Supreme Lord herein says that the words of the Brahmins are all reasonable. Each of the philosophers mentioned here reveals a particular aspect of truth, and their theories are not contradictory because they are description of the same phenomena with different categorical systems. Having spoken under the shelter of the Lord's mystic potency, none of the sages could ascertain the truth perfectly. As long as the sun and the moon remain, these differences of opinion will also continue to exist. This is the purport of this verse. Verse number 5. Natad evam yathat tvam yad aham vachim tat tatha evam vivdatam hetum shaktyo meduratyah. When philosophers argue with one another saying, I have understood things in a way superior to you, this is simply a manifestation of my insurmountable energy. By the influence of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, different philosophers are attracted to different views. And by the influence of the material atmosphere created by the Lord, these philosophers perpetually disagree with one another. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, let me offer my respectful obeisance unto the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendental qualities. acting from within the cores of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views, he causes them to forget their own souls while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Thus, he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my respectful obeisance unto him. Verse number 6. Yasam vyatikaraad asid vikalpo vadatam padam prapte sham dam peti vadastam anushamyati. It is by the interaction of my energies that different opinions arise. Okay? See, if the God's energy is not in us, we can't even speak. So that's why he says it is by the interaction of my energies that different opinions arise. However, for those who have fixed their intelligence on me and who have controlled their senses, differences of perception disappear, so that the very cause for argument is removed. So with the help of the Sham and the Dhamma, he says, all these arguments. See, sometimes we argue because we understand a little and we want to make our point and we just start arguing. So he says with the control of Sham and the Dhamma, because those are the preliminary practices as a sadhak we need to do, and there's no need to argue. Conflicting perceptions in the minds of various mundane philosophers is created by the Lord's external energy. Although deluded by the Lord's illusory energy, each philosopher thinks that he is correct, saying it may be like this and it may be like that. See, whenever we think that, no, my way is the only way, that is the only correct way, we are really talking from ego, limited knowledge. Although such thinking is surely rational, because of a limited view of reality, each philosopher argues and counter-argues without ever coming to a definite conclusion. Such quarreling is absent in the society of devotees who accept the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because a devotee thinks it's a waste of time, waste of energy. There's a God everywhere anyway. Whose vision is not limited and who is not under the influence of the illusory energy. Being enlightened in the truth, the devotees of the Lord are in complete agreement. Even if by chance there appears to be some differences in opinion, this is not because the devotees are under the influence of false ego. On the transcendental platform, there are also varieties of perception according to one's particular relationship with the Lord. See, there are several relationships. We can have a Lord as our friend, as our child, as our beloved. We can be servant of Lord. So it's depending upon the relationship, sometimes our opinion can be different. But the underlying energy is love in the devotee's heart. Verse number 7. Prasparahanu tatvanam purush rishabh paurvarye prasankhyanam yatha vaktu vivakshitam. That's verse number 7. O best among men, see Purusha Rishabha, that is the best among men. See, Lord Krishna used that term for Arjuna also several times in Bhagavad Gita. Since the subtle and gross material elements are situated within one another, various philosophers estimate their number differently. So he's talking about the 28 and the 25 and the 24 or the 9. So different numbers. The creation of the universe is enacted from subtle to gross as an effect of the inconceivable potency of the Lord. Okay? So it was like from the subtlest to the subtle to the gross. The cause is present in the effect, and so the effect is also subtly present in the cause. Considering this, it is concluded that all the elements are present in each element. It is for this reason that the elements of material nature can be categorized in various ways. Okay? So there is nothing by itself. When we see something, it's a combination of all of them. The materialistic philosophers speculate according to their own propensities and limitations. They each consider their own conclusions to be the best. This is being described in these two verses. Okay, so Lord Krishna is trying to explain it to Uddhava and to us why the different opinions. Okay. Verse number 8. Ekasmin api drishyante pravishtaha nitaraani cha पूर्वस्मिन् परस्मिन् वतत्वेः तत्वानि सर्वशः. The subtle material elements are present within their transformation. The gross elements and the gross material elements are present in their subtle causes. This is true because creation is enacted from subtle to gross in a series of transformations. For this reason, all the material elements are present in each element. In our other classes, we learned that this is called Panchikaran. Okay? So Panch means five, the five basic elements, so how they are mixed together. The example can be given that within clay, the potentiality for a clay pot exists. Just as the presence of clay is within the pot, in this way, all of the material elements are present within each element. And ultimately, all elements have as their shelter the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because who is the ultimate cause for all this? God. That is the personality of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse number 9. Po varpyam atoho misham prasankhyanam abhipastam yatha viviktam yadvaktram grihinimo yukti sambhavat. Therefore, regardless of the particular philosopher and his means of calculation, whether he includes material elements within their previous subtle causes or subsequent manifest products, I accept their conclusions as authoritative because a logical explanation can always be given for all such theories. So what he's saying, all those theories are correct. All those philosophers are correct. Because from their perspective, they're trying to analyze and they're giving us the answer. Even though materialistic philosophers rationally describe the universe from varying perceptions, they can never come to an ultimate understanding without hearing from the Lord or his representative. One should therefore not be proud of his limited intelligence just because he has some partial understanding of material existence. Due to misuse of their minute independence, even expert living entities come under the control of perpetual ignorance and thus enter into perpetual conflicts and arguments. One who does not misuse his good intelligence and is devoid of the propensity for material enjoyment is certainly a candidate for the pure devotional service of the Lord. Such a devotee can enlighten the entire world with the understanding of devotional service to the Supreme Lord. On the other hand, if a blind person guides another blind person, both will fall into a ditch. Non-devotees, such as the karmis and jnanis, can never impart perfect knowledge for the simple reason that they are not self-realized. Verse number 10. Anadhye avidyaha yuktasya purushasya atma vedanam Saktoho na sambhavad anyastatva gyo gyan do bhavet. Because the conditioned souls who have covered by the illusory energy of the Lord since time immemorial cannot effect their own liberation. There must be someone else possessing pure knowledge who can free him from material entanglement. So that means a person who has really truly drowned into the Maya cannot get out by himself. Uddhava explained how some materialistic philosophers see 25 categories of elements, whereas others see 26. Generally, this distinction is caused by a difference in spiritual understanding. Some see the individual soul and the supreme soul to be one and the same, and so they count 25, whereas others recognize the distinction between the one supreme Lord and the many minute living entities maintained by the one Lord, and so they count 26. The sixth dative case in this verse should be understood as the first dative case, because the conditioned souls forgot their constitutional position. It is the omniscient Supreme Lord who can revive their original nature by imparting to them the knowledge of the self. This is the opinion of all the Vaishnava authorities. Those who only means for acquiring knowledge is their mundane experience are unable to realize the transcendental Supreme Personality of Godhead along with his eternal variegatedness. As a result of their mundane conceptions, such empiricists preach the philosophy of impersonalism while internally remaining sense enjoyers and externally displaying renunciations. These conditioned souls, instead of understanding themselves as minute individual spirit souls, believe themselves to be the all-pervading super soul. And yet, in spite of such pretensions, such mundane philosophers cannot escape the duality of lamentation and illusion. Because of rejecting their subordination to the Supreme Lord, they forever remain within the darkness of ignorance. However, if such unfortunate souls somehow take to devotional service, then all their inauspiciousness can be destroyed. When they understand that the Supreme Lord is the only enjoyer and the original source of everything, they can simultaneously realize themselves as minute particles of spirit that are the Lord's eternal servants. Yeah. See, if we have not realized that we are the Atma, just thinking that Aham Brahmasmi, I am the God, I am the God, but no realization, no experience, what happens? That is what it's talking about over there. Experience has to be there, not just the words. Verse number 11. Purusheshwaryor atra navalakshnam anapapi tad anye kalpanarthaha jnanam cha prakrite gunaha. Knowledge is the mode of goodness, is characterized by the understanding that there is no qualitative difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. Those who imagine a qualitative difference between them are misguided. Can the statement there are 25 elements be accepted? This question is answered by the Lord in this verse. Although the individual spirit soul and the super soul are distinct entities, there is no qualitative difference between them. See, quantitative there is, qualitative there is none. It's like a cup of ocean water and the ocean. Quantitative, there is a difference, but qualitative, there's none. So this is he's trying to tell us. So let me read it. Although the individual spirit soul and the super soul are distinct entities, there's no qualitative difference between them. The difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities is that the Supreme Lord is infinite, whereas the living entities are infinite. So we are Ansh of that Ansh. The Supreme Lord is the energetic source of all energies, and the living entities are one of his energies. This establishes the proper understanding that the Supreme Lord and the living entities are simultaneously one with and different from each other. Any philosophical attempt to separate the living entity from the Supreme Lord and deny his eternal servitude to the Lord is thus refuted. Speculation arriving at the conclusion that the living entity has independent existence separate from the Lord is described here as useless. Apartha. Generally, materialists have some kind of a belief in God, but because they identify with the material body as a self, they cannot appreciate the qualitative oneness of the Lord and the living beings. For this reason, genuine understanding of the absolute truth must begin from the understanding of the spiritual quality of the living entities as distinct from the bodily concept of life. Lord Chaitanya has described the truth as a chintya bhed abhed tattva, that the Lord and the living entities are simultaneously one and different. When one cultivates the mode of goodness, this understanding develops, and by further advancement in devotional service, one can understand the variegatedness of spiritual existence. So we got to cultivate more and more satvikta in our personality. That is the mode of goodness, to be able to understand this. Verse number 12. प्रकृतिर गुण साम्यम व प्रकृतेः न आत्मनोः गुणा सत्वम रजस तम इति स्थिति उत्पत्ति अंत हेतवः. Nature originally exists in a state of equilibrium of the three modes of material nature. When these modes are agitated, then the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the universe takes place. So that means when there's a complete stillness, it's not manifested. That is called a mool prakriti also. Okay, when there's a little agitation, then we see that creation. Such events occur within the external energy of the Lord and do not pertain to the eternal spirit souls. Okay, so these things don't happen. There's no disturbance in the soul, in the Atma. This disturbance or agitation, if you want to call it, or fluctuations, whatever word you want to use, is in the Prakriti only. So this is Satvikta, Rajsikta, Tamsikta, all of it is in the Prakriti only. These modes of nature, that's why they are called, the qualities of the nature, not the Atma. Although the spirit souls are counted as the superior energy of the Lord, they are very tiny and the subject to the influence of the inferior external energy of the Lord. In their original state, the three modes of material nature are in equilibrium. And later, when material nature is agitated by the glance of the Lord. Okay? So sometimes we wonder, how does this happen? Glance of the Lord. Creation of the universe takes place, wherein the conditioned souls are bound up. These conditioned souls are not actually the doers of activities within the cosmic manifestation. While conditioned by the modes of nature, the living entities experience various conditions of life. The mode of goodness allows one to cultivate knowledge. The mode of passion allows one to work very hard. And the mode of ignorance allows one to act foolishly. However, these qualitative distinctions have no actual relation to the spirit souls, whose actual qualities are that they are eternal. So the soul is eternal. There's no movement in there. Full of knowledge and fully blissful. In the original state of material nature, the three material modes are in equilibrium. These material qualities are the causes of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the cosmic manifestation, and the spirit soul has nothing to do with them. The three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are the causes of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material world. Unlike the material nature, the spirit soul has no material qualities. In the original condition of material nature, there is equilibrium of the three modes of material nature. The material modes have no access within the kingdom of God in the unbounded atmosphere of which the eternal living entity is meant to live. There, the spiritual energies, which are known as Haladini, Sandhini, and Samavit, are present. In the spiritual world, there is no question of creation caused by the influence of time, because in that transcendental abode, time is eternally present. Verse number 13. Sattvam jnanam rajakaram tamo jnanam ih uchyate gun vyati karaha kala swabhava sutram evacha. Knowledge is the characteristic of the mode of goodness. Activities are the characteristic of the mode of passion. And ignorance is the characteristic of the mode of darkness. Time is the product of the agitation of the three modes of material nature. And the sum total of the conditioned soul's propensities is embodied within the Mahat Tattva. Knowledge can be derived from cultivation of the mode of goodness, thus leading one towards the absolute truth. Fruitive activities are born from the mode of passion, and the state of being devoid of knowledge is born from the mode of ignorance. These characteristics of the material nature are found in the conditioned souls who are being forced to exist under material designations. Kal, or time, by which the three modes of material nature are agitated, is the impetus for the interaction of the material elements. It is generally understood that knowledge is produced by the material quality of goodness, fruitive activities are enacted by the material quality of passion, and ignorance is the result of the material quality of darkness. Although there are numerous divisions of material elements, within the basic divisions, the spirit soul is always to be understood as a distinct transcendental element. Verse number 14. Purushaha prakritirvyaktam ahankaro nabho anala jyotirapah kshitiriti tatvanyah uktani menav. I have thus described the 9 basic truths as the spirit soul. Nature, the Mahat Tattva, false ego, sky, air, fire, water, and earth. In this and the next 2 verses, the Supreme Lord elucidates the 25 material elements. The word Vyakta here refers to the Mahat Tattva, like when the manifestation starts. The 9 elements, the spirit, soul, nature, the material ingredients, false ego, and the 5 gross elements are here described as a Tattva, or truth. The material nature is originally unmanifest, and later on, when it is manifest, it is known as Mahat Tattva. Okay? So unmanifest means avyakta, and manifest is vyakta. Verse number 15. Shrotram tvag darshanam grano jiveti jnana shaktya vak panye upastapaya angi karmanye ango bhayam manaha. My dear Uddhava, the ears, skin, eyes, nose, and tongue are the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. The speech, hands, legs, anus, and genitals are the 5 working senses. The mind belongs to both these categories. The word darshan means eyes. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, and the mind constitute 11 elements mentioned in this verse. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, so Jnanendriya and Karmendriya, and the mind, which is the director of both sets of senses, are known as 11 truths. Okay, so man is, that's why man is called the king also, the director of all these senses. Verse number 16. शब्दः स्पर्शः रसो गंधो रूपम चेत्ये अर्थजात्या गत्ये उक्त्ये उत्सर्ग शिल्पानि कर्मायतन सिद्ध्या. Sound, touch, form, taste, and smell are the objects of the knowledge acquiring senses. By their transformation, the 5 gross material elements are created. Movement, speech, excretion, and manufacture are functions of the working senses. The objects of the knowledge acquiring senses are 5. Thus, the Lord has enumerated 25 elements. Activities such as speaking, moving about, passing stool, passing urine, and performing artistic work are the propensities of the working senses, and as such, they should not be considered a separate truth. The objects of the senses are sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. Activities such as speaking, movement with the help of the legs, artistic work performed with the hands, and the releasing of the bodily waste through the anus and genital are the objects of the 5 working senses. By counting these activities of the working senses as one, the total becomes 26. Let's do one more verse and then we'll stop the class here today. सर्गादहु प्रकृतिर्हि अस्य कार्यः कारणरूपिणे सत्व आदिभिर् गुणैर्धते पुरुषो व्यक्तः ईक्षते. In the beginning of creation, the material nature, which consists of cause and effect, by means of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, assumes its form as the embodiment of all subtle causes and gross manifestations. The Supreme Lord, who never changes his position, simply glances over material nature and remains the witness. Ikshate. In the beginning of the material creation, material nature creates with the help of her 3 modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. The Supreme Lord remains in his transcendental position, unaffected by the actions and reactions of the gross and subtle material elements. So no effect on the Atma or Paramatma when this creation happens. Or even creation gets dissolved. Therefore, the Lord is referred to as avyakta or never manifest within the material creation. No matter in which way the material elements are categorized, it must be understood that the Supreme Lord is the ultimate cause of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the cosmic manifestation. The external energy of the Supreme Lord, which manifests as cause and effect, employs her 3 modes to perform the activities of the material world's creation, maintenance, and annihilation. The Lord personally remains unchanged as he agitates the material nature through his glance to initiate creation. Okay, so this is almost like a revision of Bhagavad Gita for us. So philosophically we know it all, but over here it's described or explained fully and beautifully. So let's end our class, and next week we'll start with verse number 18 of this chapter. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.